All good points. Part of this is who is that? Who is the critical customer? Okay, because that's who we really want to understand. And then there's lots of different ways to get your angle of attack. Alternative ways of building it, whether it's a new product or new feature, what sometimes people call a plus one feature. The company I'm talking about that's in the mobile space that's trying to sell this capability to restaurants, which enables them to push their promotional offers out to mobile phone users, internet users on a much more managed basis than they can do today using newspapers, forgive me, newspaper people in the room, or direct mail for much more cost effectively, right? But part of the co-development idea there is we could add another feature to this, which our working term for is CMO in a box, Chief Marketing Officer in a box, which is develop it with the chains, but then go out to the mom and pops and say, I'll not only sell you this capability, I'll sell you a package that helps you figure out how to use it to your maximum advantage. You'll be in the revenue management business when you're done. So you're not only going to get the tool, you're going to get the how-to, right? The old how-to-fish deal as opposed to the motor. Downstream benefits. I'm working with a company that does office cleaning services, janitorial services, but they're green. They have a system called OS1, which is, gives them all the appropriate credentials for being green. Their problem is in this recessionary environment, they're losing accounts that they've had before, and they're losing bids on price. They've been used to being able in a pre-recessionary environment to get that extra margin over other people. So the discussion now is twofold. One is, how much margin do we really have to give up if we can create the right selling story around our green capability? And if our green capability is actually saving you money over 3 to 5 years, well, why aren't we telling that story? And maybe that justifies, maybe not the margin we were getting 2 years ago, but better than everybody else is going to get. So it's not optimal, but it's acceptable. And of course, that has its rollback impact on the business model itself. How do we make money? But that's the dialogue of the next 30 days for sure. Because but there's usually some way of doing it. I'm going to tell you about a local company here called Bike Bandit that sells online motorcycle parts in a second. And they don't have a price advantage versus anybody else. It's price-driven business unless you can really deliver quicker than everybody else and reliably, which is what they've hung their hat on. Hidden differentiators. And this goes back to your point about maybe it's something that's almost manufactured. This is a real stretch in terms of analogy, but back in 1973 in Burger King, we were doing consumer research looking for problems consumers had with fast food restaurants. And way down at number 16 on their product problem list for fast food hamburger places was can't get a special order quickly, which gave rise to a campaign called Have It Your Way, which most of you that are of a certain age can probably still sing the lyrics to. Thank you very much for proving the point. Yeah, so it was a hidden differentiator. Number 16 on the consumer problem list, but not only was it a tangible benefit we could deliver, we were organized to deliver because of the nature of our production versus McDonald's, but it also was a mindset. Have it your way as a consumer attitude, which was not typical in 1973. So it's hard to believe that's 37 years ago, particularly for me. So again, the thought is look outside your industry and think by analogy. There's got to be a way, and I would suggest take that attitude. There will be a way. We just got to take time to figure it out, to differentiate ourselves, because that's what this is about. There's somebody that did. This is the local group I was talking about, and you get a hint of what they're selling when you look at their tagline there. Get it fast, get it right, get riding. So these are people that sell your bike broke down on the weekend. What's the most important thing to you? The price you pay or getting back on the bike and riding as fast as you can. And this company's been around for about 7 years, started by a former professional motorcycle racer who also had a MBA in finance, came in handy. And he's doing extremely well, and the whole system is built on really fast shipping, really accurate order fulfillment, amazing inventory management. About 84% of his inventory is almost cross-docked. And he gets better margins because he's delivering what that user really wants, which is to get back on the bike. The brick and mortar guys cannot do that. This is a cascade. Once you figure out what your edge is and what your brand position is, one of the things you want to make sure is that that cascades over everything else you do. What are the implications of taking this, trying to create this position in the market? For Bike Bandit, it's a whole culture built on everybody that works here practically rides a bike. And the CEO is in races in Baja all the time, and he's in all the magazines, and the whole lifestyle of the organization is built around communicating with that customer, living the same lifestyle, knowing what makes them tick, and then delivering against that maniacally. Changing gears. So, Brent, yeah. Go ahead.
You know, this issue of who's the consumer, if you're talking about utilities, of which there are 3 in California, plus a few others, the mindset of the people who are buying this product, whatever it might be, is pretty staid. I mean, they've been around for a long, long time, and they have a very static model. And I'm wondering, is it worth thinking about trying to change that thought process, those people, or do you have to conform to their model? Make yourself like them.
The only analog I can think of from my own experience to try to connect with that question is, again, I'll ask for forgiveness from a couple of people in the room, the academic mindset. Because I'm on the board of advisors for the College of Business at Cal State San Marcos. And about 2 years ago, we were sitting in the room listening to the dean once again recite the terrible story about state budget cuts. And we suggested as a board that the state budget model is broken. It's not coming back. So we can sit here and bitch about it and protest, or we can redesign our business model. And to do that, we can't just do that as a board. We got to get the faculty involved. We got to get students involved. We got to get the administration involved. And that led to multiple party offsite brainstorming, which led to a year's worth of work on a business plan that everybody was involved in, that we're now on the front edges of executing rather. So a long way around, you have to determine whether that group is adaptable. And I think that has to come out of dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Sempra has a lot of very innovative people within its structure, but the structure itself is kind of, SDG&E is there to provide a very basic thing all the time. And so, trying to figure out how you get at that is very challenging, I would think.
Yeah, the other quick aside to that is an educational organization that is actually grappling with change right now, because I spoke to them about 3 weeks ago, and it was the County Office of Education, K-12. And they've embarked on a change. They've come to the conclusion that they need to change the way they operate. And if you read their strategic plan material, it makes a ton of sense. And they wanted somebody in from another line of work to talk to them about some of the challenges of managing change. So I don't think it's impossible. But there certainly are some organizations and entities and cultures that are a hell of a lot tougher to move than others. Mm-hmm. The other thing that maybe starts to come into play is necessity is a great motivator. So I was telling some folks at lunch, thinking about the U.S. economy, that the analogy that I keep coming up to is we're kind of like when you were in college and you drank too much and you're going to throw up and didn't want to, and you were cutting deals with God so you wouldn't barf. You kind of wrapped around the porcelain goddess, right? And you knew that you weren't going to feel better till you threw up, but you just didn't want to throw up. U.S. economy, right there. Right. Healthcare, right there. Maybe oil dependency, right there. Until we take the medicine, we're not going to get better. But one of the toughest things we're up against is organizational, cultural issues, and that actually is a good segue. If I can go on, maybe we can come back to that point again, because I know that's the toughest. Usually, that's the toughest thing to solve. is the cultural deal. Anybody read this book, The Innovator's Dilemma? George, you missed that one? Okay. It's probably next week's reading list. It's by a guy named Clayton Christensen, and this is just a couple of thoughts out of this book. And the key message, as I took it, was that particularly for existing business entities, embracing disruptive technology is very hard to do. Right? It's very hard to do a lot of times for financial reasons, because the markets, as it emerges, is too small, or the returns aren't there and you're held to a higher standard. But a lot of it is also cultural. So that got me thinking about, I had to do something with the Burger King experience. So this is a once current technology, about 1953. Howard Johnson's. Anybody ever eaten a Howard Johnson's? Hojo, that's right. How many flavors of ice cream do they have? 31, okay. Clam rolls, excellent. Right? And then along came this disruptive technology the next year. And they couldn't deal with it. Who had more restaurant distribution in the United States? Who had better real estate? Who was financially stronger? Who had the infrastructure? Who had the branding expertise? Who had the marketing expertise? But their market started to change, and this is really over dignifying it by calling it technology, right? But it's a change in the environment. And someone else that's got a better solution, and they could not cope. And I would argue that whatever financial issues were present, it was more cultural than financial. And so as I worked my way through this book, The Innovator's Dilemma, I found myself having all these flashbacks of my years, particularly at Burger King, and thinking about when you're trying to solve for innovation in a going concern, particularly a going concern of every size, of some significant scale that has its own culture. If you're going to try to innovate, these are some things you want to be thinking about. You've got to be creative organizationally. How would you have to organize the initiative for the innovation or innovations you're trying to come up with to keep the system from killing it, to keep the culture from stinging it to death, which is what cultures like to do. You want to beware of mixed messaging in your incentive structures. Remember years ago when food courts started to proliferate across the United States in all the malls, what an opportunity for Burger King. The only thing was everybody was conditioned to drive average unit sales. And that would reduce our average unit sales because they were smaller, different kind of operations. Made a lot more money, percentage-wise. Probably a great asset for us. But the initial barrier to resistance was, well, that's not what we do here. We're driving for that number. You can become an investor in a disruptive player. The guys that made Blockbuster what it was when it was what it was, Scott Beck and Saad Nader, were two guys that had a vision for the video rental business, and their strategy in the early days was buy up all the seeds. Anybody we saw that popped up that looked like they could be a competitor, we would buy them. That was our competitive strategy. Anything that looks disruptive, get a piece of it. And the last one here, just to reiterate it, when you're thinking about innovating, again, this is something I think I must have learned because I find myself coming back to it again and again, and that is collaborate with your customers. Spend more time thinking in terms of co-developing. What's the problem you're trying to solve? Let's investigate together how we could get that done. Same with vendors. Anyway, just some thoughts organizationally, branding, and innovation.